Shenhao, I live in my godmother's house, and the system makes me the king of the CCH 11 to 20. Chapter 11, Dining, Shopping, and Watching a Movie. Fang Tian and Su Wan arrived at the underground garage. In Gasu's early summer, the underground garage wasn't hot, a cool draft carried a faint, damp scent of cement. The sensor lights overhead flickered on one by one, reflecting off the floor. Su Wan stood before her 3 parking spaces, visibly struggling with indecision. 3 cars were parked side by side. A white Audi A5, a blue Lexus ES, and a milky green Beetle. All 3 cars were polished to a shine, clearly well maintained. Which one should I drive? Su Wan rested her left hand on her right elbow, her right fingertips tapping lightly on her chin, her willow leaf brows slightly furrowed. Godmother, don't overthink it. Let's take mine. Fang Tian smiled, walked over to the car on the right of the 3, and patted the roof. His ride, a black BMW X3. BMW really is something, even having a branch in a parallel world. Mercedes-Benz, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky, it didn't exist in this world, replaced by a brand called Bentong, which sounded like a home appliance manufacturer. This X3 had cost over 500,000 when he bought it. As for why he bought it, Fang Tian almost laughed out loud after reviewing the original owner's memories. Apparently, the original owner had been obsessed with a VTuber for a while, camping in the live stream room and gifting constantly, until one day he gathered the courage to ask what car she liked. She said she liked the BMW X3, so he went to the dealership the next day and bought one in full. But 3 days after buying it, he lost all interest in that VTuber and moved on to fawn over a singing streamer. Fang Tian still couldn't understand the original owner's thought process. Okay. Then we'll take your car. Su Wan nodded with relief and stuffed all 3 car keys back into her purse. In other words, she hadn't decided which car to drive when she left the house, planning to struggle with the decision once she got to the garage. She had spent a full half-minute agonizing over it in the garage without reaching a decision. If he hadn't offered to take his car, Su Wan would probably still be standing in front of the 3 cars, playing eeny meeny miny mo. Godmother's indecisiveness was unexpectedly kind of cute. I'll drive. Fang Tian opened the driver's side door, a long-lost sense of excitement in his movements. In his previous life, he was an experienced driver who had driven everything from big rigs to small cars, but he hadn't touched a steering wheel in this life, and his hands were itching. He sat in the driver's seat and adjusted the seat and rear-view mirror. Su Wan put her bag in the back seat first, then opened the passenger door and sat in. She was wearing the same pink and white athletic loungewear, a cropped jacket with athletic shorts, her 2 fair, long legs standing out against the dark interior of the car. As she turned to pull the seat belt, Fang Tian's eyes widened. The seat belt pulled diagonally from Su Wan's left shoulder, passing right between her 2 mountains on her chest. As the belt tightened, her athletic jacket and the tank top underneath were pressed down, the 2 full curves being divided by the seat belt and squeezed inward, making that deep cleavage even more pronounced. Moreover, the seat belt had some elasticity, the tighter it pulled, the stronger the rebound. The strap sank slightly into the soft fabric, and the curves on either side swayed gently as she adjusted her posture. Fang Tian's Adam's apple bobbed. Su Wan really had a great figure. Those curves weren't squeezed out by a bra, but were naturally round and firm, held tight without sagging or spreading, like a perfect sketch outlined by the diagonal seat belt. All set, Tian Tian, let's go. Su Wan buckled her seat belt and smiled at him, completely unaware of the visual impact she had just caused. Fang Tian steadied himself, shifted his gaze away from the curves outlined by the seat belt, and pressed the gas. The engine roared lightly, and the car started smoothly. Soon, Su Wan noticed something that surprised her. Fang Tian drove very steadily. So steady that he didn't seem like a young man at all. She had seen plenty of young people driving. They all thought they were reincarnated racing gods, flooring the gas, changing lanes without signaling, and tailgating. Watching them drive made her heart jump into her throat. But Fang Tian wasn't like that. He overtook when necessary and changed lanes when needed, his movements crisp and clean, the steering wheel moving fluidly in his hands. But throughout the drive, the speed remained steady, the car barely swayed, and sitting in the passenger seat felt just like sitting on her own sofa. Her back had been pressed against the seat back since they started, not shifting once. Tian Tian, why do you drive so steadily? Su Wan turned to look at him, a hint of surprise and appreciation in her eyes. Is it? Fang Tian focused on the road ahead, his lips curling slightly. Maybe it's because I cherish my life. He couldn't exactly say he was an old driver who had held a license for over a decade, right? He even used to drive big tractor trailers. Cherishing life is good, one should cherish life when driving. Su Wan nodded with satisfaction, and the way she looked at him held an extra layer of reassurance. The Huayang restaurant recommended by Su Wan was on the third floor of a commercial complex in the Gusu Industrial Park. The environment was elegant, with warm yellow pendant lights, blue brick and gray tile decor, and semi-transparent gauze curtains separating the booths. They took a small booth by the window, overlooking the atrium of the mall, where they could see the bustling crowd below. Steamed crab roe lion's head, braised dried tofu threads, squirrel-shaped mandarin fish, and crystal pork terrine. Fang Tian ate 3 big bowls of rice, feeling satisfied, and leaned back on the chair to pat his stomach, letting out a small burp. Su Wan watched him polish off 70 or 80% of the food on the table, her eyes narrowing into crescent moons. Fang Tian being able to eat meant his body was recovering. She was happier than anything else. After the meal, the two strolled through the mall to buy daily necessities needed after the move. Towels, toothbrushes, bath towels, slippers. Even though Fang Tian's old things could still be used, Su Wan insisted on using new ones for the move, picking out a whole new set for him. Fang Tian pushed the cart behind her, watching Su Wan's back as she bent over to pick things from the shelves, and suddenly felt very happy. There were many people in the mall. Fang Tian noticed a phenomenon: many men had more than one woman by their side. Not the cheating, sneaky kind. But openly having one on the left and one on the right, chatting and laughing, with the women getting along harmoniously. He checked his memories and understood. It turned out that the gender ratio in this world was severely imbalanced, and many countries had adopted incentive policies for this phenomenon. Some countries even had subsidies for taking wives: the more you took, the more subsidies you got. As for China, it was an old tradition, neither encouraging nor opposing it, which amounted to tacitly allowing this phenomenon to exist. Fang Tian sighed inwardly, what a magical world. Tian Tian, is this color nice? Su Wan held up 2 bath towels, one light gray and one off-white, waving them in front of him, interrupting his distraction. The off-white one, it matches your home's decor. I'll listen to you. It was past 2 in the afternoon when they got home. The two of them organized the new things they bought one by one. After everything was settled, they finally had some free time. Su Wan sprawled out on the wide fabric sofa in the living room. Her 2 glowing white legs stretched out from the legs of her athletic shorts, resting casually on the sofa armrest, calves raised, ankles crossed. One of her slippers had fallen to the floor, while the other hung precariously from her toe. Her toes, painted with green polish, curled slightly, the arc of her arch looking exceptionally graceful. She rested her chin on one hand, while the other reached into the fruit platter nearby to grab grapes. Fang Tian sat beside her, holding the fruit platter, acting as a human shelf. A comedy movie was playing on the TV, something called Adventures in the Postpartum Care Center, about a male nurse working in a postpartum care center and the various mishaps that occurred. The plot was quite funny. The two laughed from time to time, the atmosphere relaxed and cozy. When Su-won laughed, her right leg would unconsciously lift and fall, her fair calf tapping lightly on the sofa leather, making a muffled sound. That movement was both lazy and childlike, not at all like someone in her 30s. Fang Tian's gaze was drawn to her leg lifting action, but he quickly pulled it back, staring at the TV screen. A moment later, he was drawn to it again. He pulled it back again. This happened several times. Tian Tian, this one is for you. Su-won picked the biggest, roundest grape from the fruit platter and handed it over without turning her head. Fang Tian reached out to take it subconsciously, but Su-won stuffed it directly into his mouth. Her fingertips touched his lips, soft and slightly cool, stained with grape juice. Is it sweet? Sweet. Fang Tian chewed the grape and replied indistinctly. He didn't know if it was the grape that was sweet, or the finger that had just touched his lips. Su-won reached into the fruit platter again, and this time her back of the hand accidentally brushed against Fang Tian's wrist as he held the platter. She didn't pull back, just naturally popped the grape into her own mouth, her eyes fixed on the TV, her expression focused. The movie reached the part where the male lead was chased and beaten by the maternity matron, and Su-won laughed so hard that her right leg tapped the sofa several times, her whole body shaking. The hem of her cropped athletic jacket rode up, revealing a small patch of fair skin on her waist dimples shallow and lines soft. Fang Tian moved the fruit platter toward her to make it easier for her to reach. You should eat too, don't just hold it for me. Su-won turned her head to look at him, her almond eyes still holding lingering laughter. I've eaten plenty, these are for Godmother. Good boy. Su-won reached out and ruffled his hair, then rolled over from lying on her stomach to lying on her side, pulling a cushion under her head. This position displayed her body curves to Fang Tian completely. The indentation of her waist, the curve of her hips, the long, crossed lines of her legs, looked like an oil painting against the warm gray background of the fabric sofa. This movie isn't bad, let's watch another one next time. Su-won said. Sure, I'll keep Godmother company. Fang Tian leaned against the back of the sofa, holding the fruit platter, Godmother lying beside him watching the movie, the living room curtains blown gently by the breeze, the afternoon sun moving slowly across the floor. Chapter 12, Su-won doing yoga. Dinner was made by Fang Tian. Well, actually, he was responsible for cooking the rice and washing the vegetables, while Su-won manned the wok and stir-fried for home-style dishes. The two sat opposite each other at the dining table to finish their meal. He even took the half bowl of rice left in Su-won's bowl and polished it off. Su-won watched him wipe the plates clean, put away the bowls and chopsticks with satisfaction, and then stood up, looking down at her own stomach. I ate too much tonight. I need to get some exercise. Her tone was exceptionally serious. Huh? Godmother, you didn't gain weight, it's fine to indulge for a day. He wasn't just buttering her up when he said that. Su-won definitely wasn't fat. Every bit of flesh on her body was in exactly the right place. The two mountain peaks on her chest went without saying, her hips were round and perky, and her thighs were plump and fleshy. As for her waist and limbs, the parts that were supposed to be slender were not lacking in the slightest. This kind of body proportion was something many young girls dreamed of having. No, today was too decadent. Su-won clenched her fists, her expression serious. I'm going to practice yoga later. Tian Tian, don't try to talk me out of it. Yoga. Fang Tian was stunned for a moment. Knowing it was yoga, he certainly wouldn't try to talk her out of it. Doing yoga, how good it was for his eyes. His brain had already started auto-playing classic scenes from yoga tutorials, cat pose, downward facing dog, butterfly pose, splits, and the main character in every scene was Su-won. Fang Tian almost couldn't hold back the corner of his mouth, quickly giving himself a mental slap to manage his expression. All right then, Godmother, Just don't overwork yourself. His face carried a bit of unable to persuade helplessness, and his tone was mixed with a hint of reluctant consideration. After the meal, Fang Tian accompanied Su Wan for a half-hour walk around the residential complex to aid digestion. The early summer evening in Gusu was very comfortable, the evening breeze was cool, and there was the scent of gardenias in the air. Su Wan had changed into a pair of white sneakers and was walking in front, her two fair, long legs extending from the legs of her athletic shorts, her ponytail swinging back and forth behind her head. After returning home and resting for 10 minutes or so, Su Wan got up to go to the bedroom to change clothes. Taking advantage of this gap, Fang Tian casually pulled a book from the bookshelf and sat on the living room sofa, pretending to flip through it. He didn't even look at the book title, just flipped to a random page, his eyes fixed on the words, while his mind was already mentally preparing for the upcoming yoga viewing. When Su Wan came out of the bedroom, Fang Tian turned a page of the book. Then, his gaze could never turn to the next page. Su Wan had changed into a pure white yoga outfit. It was that kind of specialized athletic style, short-sleeved with shorts. The fabric was professional four-way stretch material, not exactly transparent, but form-fitting to the extreme. The top was a V-neck, short-sleeved design, with the neckline cut just right, neither overly revealing nor failing to showcase the proud contours of that plump area. The fabric tightly wrapped around her upper body, outlining smooth curves from her chest to the hem, every rise and fall clearly visible. The shorts on her lower body only reached slightly below the base of her thighs. The leg openings weren't tight, but at the hips, they were stretched to the limit, the two round and perky arcs particularly striking under the wrapping of the white fabric. Standing straight, the pant legs swayed slightly, revealing the long, slender lines of her thighs underneath. Her thighs were plump, her calves slender, and her skin was extremely delicate under the illumination of the living room lights. What was even more fatal was that the yoga outfit perfectly revealed the curves of her waist. The tapering arc from her chest to her waist, and the blooming line from her waist to her hips, were like a carefully designed vase. Su Wan walked out barefoot, her toes painted with green polish stepping on the wooden floor, the skin on the backs of her feet very white, with veins faintly visible. She had that happy, satisfied expression on her face from having just changed clothes, walked to the center of the living room, spun around, and then asked, "Tian Tian, does Godmother look like she has a really good figure wearing this?" Her tone was light and cheerful, like a young girl waiting to be complimented. "No, Godmother. Please be a little more careful. In front of you is a young man in his 20s, full of vigor, whose life is a straight line with only one goal. You asking like this makes it very difficult for me." Fang Tian pretended to lift his head from the book, his gaze traveling over Su Wan as purely as possible. From the plump chest wrapped in the white yoga outfit, to the alluring tapering arc of her waist, to those plump, fair thighs beneath the shorts. He nodded, using a tone of pure appreciation. "Yes, Godmother. You already had a good figure to begin with, and wearing this makes it look even better." It was more than just good looking. Little Fang Tian was already standing tall and proud. He, good. You keep reading, Godmother is going to do yoga." Su Wan stepped barefoot onto the yoga mat laid out in front of the TV. She had her back to Fang Tian and began doing simple stretches. Arms raised above her head, body bending to one side, the curves of her waist were stretched even longer and more beautifully in the side bend pose. How could Fang Tian still be in the mood to read? His eyes had long since abandoned the text, locked entirely on Su Wan. The book was still in his hands. But his eyes had already changed targets. He even pretended to flip a page, but his gaze hadn't left the scenery on the yoga mat for even half a second. After watching for 7 or 8 minutes, Fang Tian got the gist of it. Su Wan probably hadn't been practicing yoga for long. Many of her movements were not quite right, and for some poses, she clearly hadn't found the right points of exertion. For example, When doing downward facing dog, her heels couldn't touch the ground at all. When doing cat pose, her lumbar spine didn't sink enough, and when doing butterfly pose, her knees were stuck way up high, unable to be pushed down. She was practicing very seriously, though, and a layer of fine sweat beads had already appeared on her forehead. A small patch of the white yoga outfit at the center of her back was soaked with sweat, sticking to her skin and revealing a thin layer of moisture underneath. And the dog system also appeared after a long absence. Facing a godmother whose yoga movements are not standard, your choices are: 1. Walk forward, chuckling, "Godmother, let's stop doing yoga, let's go to bed and do some better, more exciting exercise together." 2. Cross your legs, and mock her in a devil-may-care way, "You're doing yoga at this level? Don't embarrass yourself, radio calisthenics are more suitable for you." 3. Walk directly in front of her, take out your weapon, and say, "Godmother, be a good girl, open your mouth." 4. Use a Tryndamere-style charge to knock her over, shouting, "Get to the bedroom and do it. You're dirtying my eyes." 5. Carry forward the spirit of helping others and take the initiative to offer help. Fang Tian looked from option 1 to option 4, the twitching of his mouth corners getting wider with each one. This dog system really wasn't acting like a human. He didn't even dare to let the image of option 3's "be a good girl, open your mouth" linger in his mind for more than half a second. Fortunately, there was option 5. As someone who died for acting bravely for a just cause, carrying forward the spirit of helping others was a fine quality engraved in his bones. Besides, if Su Wan's movements weren't standard and she injured herself practicing wrong, what then? Out of concern for his elder, he had an obligation and a responsibility to help. Fang Tian completed the set of high-sounding mental excuses in his head in 5 seconds, then decisively chose option 5. He closed the book and stood up. Taking advantage of the standing motion and the looseness of his pants, he secretly adjusted the angle of little Fang Tian so it wouldn't be too conspicuous. Deep breath. Walk over. "Godmother, are you a beginner? Is it a bit difficult doing yoga by yourself? Let me help you." He walked to the front of the yoga mat, looking down at Su Wan, who was working hard to press her calves. Su Wan tilted her head up to look at him. Her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat, a few stray hairs sticking to her temples and neck. The neckline of her white yoga outfit was also soaked in a small circle, the sweat glistening in the hollow of her collarbone. Her chest was heaving slightly from the recent exercise, that deep cleavage appearing and disappearing at the edge of the V-neck, rising and falling gently with her breath. After breaking into a light sweat, she didn't look disheveled at all, but rather had a unique kind of sexiness. Her skin was made more translucent and fair by the sweat, like a piece of suet jade that had just emerged from water. She smiled and nodded, "Okay. You help Godmother press down, I can't press down on my own." Her voice still carried a slight pant after exercise, soft and sweet. Fang Tian squatted down behind her. The moment he got close, a scent mixed with the fragrance of body wash and the body heat steaming off her rushed toward him. This scent, carrying the warmth of a woman's body, slightly salty and slightly sweet, drilled into his nostrils and shot straight to his crown. "Godmother, that butterfly pose you just did wasn't right, your knees were raised too high. I'll help you press your back first, you lean your body forward." Fang Tian's voice was steady, not trembling. Even if the hand he reached out was shaking a little. Su Wan obediently sat in the butterfly pose, the soles of her feet facing each other, knees open to the sides. She bent her waist, trying hard to lean her body forward, but her spine just wouldn't press down. Fang Tian knelt behind her, placing his hands gently on her back. The moment his palms touched her, Su Wan's back trembled slightly. The fabric of the yoga outfit was as thin as a cicada's wing, and he could almost feel the temperature and delicate texture of the skin beneath. "Relax, don't be nervous. Deep breath. He pushed forward gently, the force not heavy, but very steady. Su Wan's body slowly leaned forward along with his force, and her knees pressed down a few inches lower onto the yoga mat. It's a bit sore here. Su Wan's voice carried a slight note of pain. Soreness is normal, it means the stretch is hitting the right spot. Let's do it again, inhale, exhale. Fang Tian's palm slid slowly down her back, from her shoulder blades to her lower back. Her waist was very slender, when his palms pressed on it, he could feel the muscle lines on both sides of her spine, the tapering arc inward so beautiful it was startling. After pushing and pressing through the butterfly pose a few times, Fang Tian helped her adjust for downward-facing dog. The visual impact of this pose was too great. Su Wan supported herself with her hands on the floor, hips raised high, her whole body forming an inverted V shape. The white yoga shorts were stretched tight in this pose, the two round arcs pointing straight at the ceiling. Fang Tian stood behind her, reaching out to press her lower back down a bit. Little Fang Tian, however, gave a jump. Press down here, try to straighten your legs as much as possible, step your heels toward the ground. I can't step down. Su Wan's voice was muffled. Take your time. I'll hold you steady first. Fang Tian's hands slid from her lower back to the sides of her hips, holding her loosely. His fingers could feel the curve of Su Wan's hip bones and the soft, resilient texture beneath the yoga pants. Under the guidance of his palms, Su Wan slowly adjusted her posture, her hips swaying a few times before his eyes. Fang Tian felt his throat go dry and tight, and quickly coughed to cover it up. Okay, that's about right, get up. Su Wan withdrew from the pose, sat back on the yoga mat, and let out a long breath. Her face was flushed from the exercise and improved circulation, beads of sweat from her forehead sliding down her temples and dripping onto the neckline of her yoga outfit. Having someone to help really makes a difference. Tian Tian. Have you studied yoga? She looked up at Fang Tian, surprise and joy in her almond-shaped eyes. No, I just read it in a book. Fang Tian didn't change his expression or miss a beat. It wasn't just from a book. It was that the various movie teachers taught him well. Then, will you help Godmother often in the future? Okay. Fang Tian agreed with lightning speed. Su Wan sat back down on the yoga mat, and Fang Tian helped her press through a few more sets of movements. Every time he leaned down close to her, every time his palms touched her, it was like blowing gently on a flame. The entire living room was filled with an indescribable, ambiguous atmosphere. Just as Fang Tian was becoming a bit immersed in this atmosphere, little Fang Tian ran into trouble. Chapter 13, A Poke. The situation was like this. Su Wan wanted to do a straddle forward fold. This movement is an advanced pose in yoga, requiring the practitioner to open their legs into a side split, then fold the upper body forward, with the chest and abdomen flat against the ground. The difficulty coefficient is roughly equivalent to driving on Mount Akina right after getting a driver's license. But Su Wan couldn't even do a side split, let alone add a forward fold on top of that. She struggled alone on the yoga mat for a long time, but after opening her legs to a barely obtuse angle, she couldn't go any further. Her knees were raised high, still a long way from the ground. She bit her lower lip and tried again, but the muscles on the inner thighs were stretched to the point of pain. She was stuck, unable to advance or retreat. Tian Tian, help me press my legs. I want to do a straddle forward fold. Su Wan shouted huffily at Fang Tian. Her voice carried a touch of rapid, shallow panting, but the ending note was soft and lingering, sounding both like a command and a coquettish plea. Fang Tian didn't go over immediately. He analyzed objectively and rationally, Godmother, you are a beginner, the straddle forward fold is too difficult. For many people, just opening their legs to 180 degrees with the back of their knees flat on the ground is already very hard, and to add a forward fold to that, making the chest and abdomen touch the ground, is even harder. Let's take it slow. His words were well reasoned, containing both an objective assessment of the yoga difficulty and care and consideration for Su-won. Under normal circumstances, Su-won would probably nod in agreement. But today was different. Perhaps it was because Fang Tian had just helped her press through a few sets of movements, giving her the illusion that I can do this, or perhaps it was the endorphins from the exercise making her extra excited, but Su-won insisted, "It's fine, let me try the side split first. With your help, it should be no problem. Come quickly." When she said that last "come quickly," her ending note rose slightly, carrying a hint of coquettishness, and combined with those almond eyes that were exceptionally moist from exercise, the lethality was maxed out. It was practically killing Fang Tian. If he could still refuse this, would he even be human? So he crouched behind Su-won to help her press her legs. But he was constantly paying attention to the movements of little Fang Tian. Little Fang Tian was very excited right now. The 7 or 8 minutes of watching earlier, combined with the hands-on physical contact, had already put this hard body, just upgraded to 11.94 centimeters, into a state of full power operation. Even though the sweatpants material was loose, and he could cover it with his top when standing, he couldn't hide it once he crouched down. Sure enough, as soon as he crouched, a clear tent propped up at his crotch. The angle was quite high, like that straight flagpole at a flag-raising ceremony. Fang Tian could only crouch behind Su-won in pain and pleasure. He grasped her calves with both hands, helping her spread her legs outward. The skin on Su-won's calves was very fair, and holding them in his hands, he could feel a delicate, warm, and soft touch. Although his own skin wasn't bad, Su-won's flesh was softer and smoother, like holding a piece of warm silk. How could a side split be that easy? Even with Fang Tian helping to press from the side, Su-won's legs still wouldn't open. Her flexibility was probably just a bit better than the average person, but it was still several levels away from the flexibility required for a side split. "Tian Tian, this won't work." Su-won got a bit anxious, turned her head to look at Fang Tian, sweat beads still hanging on her forehead. "Come sit in front, and use your feet to push against mine to expand outward. That's the only way to apply force properly." Fang Tian's brain instantly sounded a red alert. Sit in front? Wouldn't that be face to face? If it were face to face, little Fang Tian's current state would absolutely be exposed completely. The current Fang Tian was no longer that 8.54 centimeters contender from when he first transmigrated. He had grown nearly 4 centimeters, and the specifications of his hard body were incomparable to before. Now, if he sat down, he wouldn't be able to hide it at his crotch no matter what. "Godmother, how about I help you from behind? The effect is the same." Fang Tian proposed an alternative plan. From behind, Su-won couldn't see. If it was exposed, so be it. Anyway, she didn't have eyes on the back of her head. "Behind won't work, my center of gravity is in the back, and if you apply force from behind, I'll easily fall forward." Su-won shook the towel in her hand and unleashed her trump card again, her voice soft and sweet. "Come to the front, come quickly." That "come" was dragged out long, the ending note curving, like a fluffy feather brush sweeping across the tip of Fang Tian's heart. Coquettish again. And she had already precisely discovered it? Fang Tian had zero resistance to her coquettishness. Fang Tian gritted his back teeth and steeled his heart. "You were the one who told me to come over, it wasn't like I wanted to expose myself proactively. If I really get discovered, you can't blame me." So he stood up, walked around to Su-won's front, and sat down on the yoga mat opposite her. The two were face to face, very close, so close that Fang Tian could feel the hot air Su-won exhaled, carrying a hint of light panting after exercise, brushing against his face. Su-won looked even more alluring now than at any other time. Her pure white yoga outfit was soaked with sweat in several places at the neckline and back, clinging to her skin, vaguely revealing the skin tone underneath. Her forehead was covered in dense beads of sweat, with a few strands of hair sticking to her temples and cheeks. A small pool of sweat had collected in her collarbone hollow, glistening under the light. Her chest rose and fell with her breathing. That deep cleavage appearing and disappearing at the edge of the V-neck. Her cheeks were flushed red from exercise, and her lips were even rosier than usual. Fang Tian took a deep breath and did as Su Wan said. He propped his hands on the yoga mat behind him, opened his legs, and stretched out his feet to push against the inner sides of Su Wan's feet. Foot to foot. The moment their feet touched, they both trembled almost simultaneously. Su Wan's feet were warm and soft. Fang Tian's legs slowly expanded outward. Su Wan's feet were being pushed by his, and they also followed, opening outward bit by bit. The more they opened, the tighter Su Wan's brows furrowed, and her lips were bitten white. As for Fang Tian, the more he expanded outward, the less that middle area could be hidden. His loose sweatpants were stretched to the limit, the outline of the tent clearly visible. Fortunately, Su Wan was in so much pain that her eyes were tightly closed, and she wasn't looking down at all. Ah, it hurts. 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 No more, no more. The degree of stretching exceeded Su Wan's tolerance. She let out a groan of pain, crying out loudly, and her body fell backward uncontrollably. Seeing this, Fang Tian immediately retracted his feet, stood up with a swoosh, and bent down to help her. "Godmother, are you okay?" Fang Tian was very worried. His movements in helping Su Wan up were deft, one hand supporting her back, the other holding her forearm, lifting her up from the yoga mat. "I'm fine, it just hurts a little." After Su Wan sat steadily, she smiled at Fang Tian, then winced in pain after smiling, laughing and gasping at the same time, looking both pitiful and cute. Judging by her state, she probably just pulled a muscle in her inner thigh, and it would be fine after resting for a while. Fang Tian breathed a sigh of relief. But the problem was, he had stood up too hurriedly just now, with all his attention on Su Wan, and had completely forgotten that he still had a tent that hadn't been retracted. His pants were pushed up high, the shape striking. He didn't notice. Su Wan noticed it. Perhaps it was because of the pain, but Su Wan's reaction was probably much slower than usual, and her brain hadn't caught up yet. She looked down and saw that obviously abnormal bulge on Fang Tian's pants, and her first reaction was actually not shock, but confusion. "Tian Tian, what is this?" She extended her finger. A poke. That fair, slender finger, painted with pink nail polish, pressed against the fabric of the sweatpants, right on the tip of little Fang Tian. Time seemed to stand still for half a second. Then Su Wan realized. What she poked wasn't anything else. It was her godson's that. Ah! Su Wan let out a sharp scream, the volume probably loud enough to cover the entire floor. She sprang up from the yoga mat, not even wearing her slippers, and ran barefoot, patter-patter, towards the master bedroom. The towel she had just used to wipe sweat was still left beside the yoga mat, and she stepped on it in her panic. The bedroom door slammed shut. Click, locked. Su Wan leaned her back against the bedroom door, panting heavily. Her chest heaved violently, and her heart was beating so fast it felt like it was about to jump out of her throat. She had just poked it. She had poked Fang Tian's that. She raised her hand and looked down at the finger that had just poked it. The tip of her index finger was clean. Nothing there, but she kept feeling that small patch of skin burning hot. Shouldn't she have done that? Did she do something wrong? Did she scare Tian Tian? Su Wan's mind was in a chaotic mess. Chapter 14, One Door, Two People. No, wait, when did little Fang Tian get so big? To the point where a clear outline could be felt even through sweatpants, it definitely wasn't a normal state. When did he start having a reaction? Was it when he was helping her press her legs? Or was it when she acted spoiled and said, "Hurry up and come over"? Or was it even earlier? From the moment she walked out of the bedroom wearing this yoga outfit? Soo-won pressed her hand against her burning left cheek to cool it down, but then her right cheek started burning up too. She was 35 years old, a full 11 years older than Fang Tian. By seniority, she was his aunt, his godmother. She had always felt like an elder in front of Fang Tian, responsible for taking care of him, worrying about him, and helping him recover his health. She had never thought about things in any other way. At least, that was what she told herself. But what about Fang Tian? He could have clearly helped from behind just now, so why did he hesitate when she told him to come to the front? Did he know he would be exposed? He had said before that Godmother has a good figure, that she looks even better in this, and that he always thought Godmother was very beautiful. Were those compliments genuine, or did they have another meaning? Soo-won's heart beat even faster. But as it pounded, she realized the corners of her mouth were actually curling upward. She covered her mouth. "Don't laugh. Soo-won, you are not allowed to laugh." But she couldn't suppress that curve. A young man in his early 20s, clean-cut and handsome, would have a physiological reaction just because she was doing yoga nearby. He would be at a loss for words because of her acting spoiled. He would mutter her name in his sleep, saying, "Godmother, you're so beautiful." She was 35 years old. And she could still make a boy 11 years younger than her react like that. Soo-won took her hand away from her mouth, giving up control over her facial muscles. Standing behind the bedroom door, leaning against the door panel, she smiled secretly to herself. That smile was bashful, yet filled with secret joy. Her fingers were still burning. The sensation of that poke just now. Through the fabric of the sweatpants, she had poked something hard and elastic. She had pulled her hand away with just a light touch, but that brief instant left a lingering warmth on her fingertips that wouldn't dissipate. Soo-won walked to the bed and sat down, burying her face in the pillow. She kicked her feet in the air twice and giggled muffledly into the pillow. Tian Tian must be very embarrassed in the living room right now. With her running away so suddenly, would he overthink things? Would he think she was angry? How was she supposed to face him tomorrow? Soo-won lifted her face from the pillow, her cheeks flushed rosy. Forget it, she'd worry about tomorrow when it came. She rolled over and lay on her back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers still clutching the corner of the quilt. Only two images kept replaying in her mind. One was the sensation she accidentally poked. The other was the words Fang Tian murmured in his sleep. "Godmother, you're so beautiful." Soo-won pulled the quilt over her head to cover her face and curled up in the blankets. "Tian Tian, you really are, what is Godmother supposed to do with you?" In the living room. Fang Tian stood alone by the yoga mat, looking down at the not yet calmed little Fang Tian, then looking up at Soo-won's tightly closed bedroom door. His current mood could probably be summarized in one sentence: "Godmother, you're the one who wanted to poke it, I didn't make you do it." Then he looked down at the tent in his pants that hadn't fully subsided, looking helpless. "You're quite happy after being poked, but now you've scared her away. Are you satisfied now?" However, Fang Tian narrowed his eyes, recalling Soo-won's expression before she turned and ran. In that expression, there was shock and embarrassment. But it seemed, there was no anger. Congratulations to the host for completing the option. Rewards: System Mall Access Permission, Attribute Points +3, Cash 10,000 RMB, deposited into the bank card under your name. The System Mall is open? And 3 attribute points? There's actually 10,000 in cash? Fang Tian was stunned for a moment. Previously, the cash rewards for option tasks were mostly a few hundred or a few thousand, with 5,000 being the most at once. This time it gave 10,000 directly, plus attribute points and mall access. It seemed that although this exposure was embarrassing, the compensation from the system was quite generous. Before he could ponder what the system mall was, a system dialog box popped up again. Faced with your godmother who fled in panic, your choice is 1. Proactively step forward to explain. 2. Show your manly prowess, break down the door, and go straight for the forced kiss, wall slam, and bed trio. 3. Take out your phone, call the police beauty, and tearfully accuse your godmother of sexual harassment. 4. Do nothing and wait for things to develop. Fang Tian didn't hesitate this time. Option 2 was purely the start of a crime movie. Option 3 was a psychiatric plotline. Option 4 seemed safe, but he had an intuition. He couldn't let the atmosphere cool down at this time. If he did nothing, when Su Wan woke up tomorrow, there was a high probability she would act as if nothing happened and pretend they both had amnesia. On the surface, the relationship would return to normal, but those intimate interactions like pressing legs by the yoga mat would likely never return. Su Wan would intentionally keep her distance. Let him press her legs? Forget it, she wouldn't even do yoga in front of him anymore. Fang Tian could afford to wait. But little Fang Tian couldn't really wait any longer. So he had to take this opportunity to make things clear. He couldn't let her keep this bottled up in her heart until it festered into a grudge. So he walked toward the master bedroom door. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of knocking was exceptionally crisp in the quiet living room. No response. Completely expected. Fang Tian took a deep breath and began his carefully organized apology. Godmother, I'm sorry. His voice was neither high nor low, his tone steady, but every word carried sincere apology. I just made a fool of myself. I let you see something you shouldn't have seen, and you even touched it. I'm really sorry. The other side of the door was as quiet as if no one were there. But Godmother, I want to explain. What just happened really wasn't me being disrespectful to you. It was just a normal physiological reaction. He paused, his tone becoming more frank, even carrying a hint of self-deprecating laughter. I'm a normal 24-year-old male. With you wearing a yoga outfit and doing yoga in front of me, Godmother, I'm not a stone. How could I not have any reaction at all? And Fang Tian softened his voice even more, as if whispering a secret to Su Wan on the other side of the door, and this isn't entirely my fault. Godmother, you are responsible too. A very faint, confused hum came from the other side of the door. Su Wan probably couldn't help but react upon hearing those words behind the door. Your responsibility is, you're too beautiful. When Fang Tian said this, the self-deprecation was gone, replaced by a sincere frankness. Godmother, when I complimented your looks before, it wasn't just being polite or trying to make you happy. I truly think you are very beautiful. Last time at your house for dinner, when you walked out of the bedroom wearing that floral dress, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Wearing this yoga outfit today, you're even more beautiful than last time. So the situation just now was, someone as beautiful as you was doing yoga in front of me, with sweat dampening the stray hairs on your forehead, your cheeks all rosy, and you even acted spoiled and said hurry up and come over. I'm a normal man. If I didn't have a reaction, then something would be wrong. There was still no sound from the other side, but Fang Tian could feel that she was listening intently to him. Fang Tian struck while the iron was hot, lowering the temperature of his voice another degree, making it gentle and understanding. Godmother, I know you might feel embarrassed. After all, in your eyes, I'm just a junior. You take care of me like a son and have never thought about other things. With me suddenly having this kind of reaction, you must have been startled. I can understand that. But Godmother, you have to believe me. I have never had any disrespectful thoughts about you. Living with you, eating with you, watching movies with you, shopping with you, I enjoy all of it. That physiological reaction just now was only because I'm too young and couldn't control my adrenaline. It wasn't because I have any filthy designs on you. So, Godmother, will you forgive me? After Fang Tian finished speaking, he stood quietly outside the door and waited. Would there be a response? Chapter 15, Giving You Stockings, Solve It Yourself. This entire explanation had 7 key elements, and not one could be missing. First, admit fault to show one's attitude. Then, clarify that this was a normal physiological reaction to eliminate Su-won's concerns about whether he was a pervert. Then, shift some of the responsibility onto Su-won's charm, turning her from a victim into the catalyst. This step was the most crucial. It complimented her while leaving her no room to argue. Next, reinforce the compliment by saying you are too beautiful. Then, express understanding from her perspective so she would feel respected. Then, re-anchor the relationship between the two on the intimacy of living together, making her feel that this incident shouldn't destroy such wonderful things. Finally, end with a request that shows vulnerability. Inside the door, Su-won sat on the floor with her back against the door. Hugging her knees with both arms, her chin resting on them, her cheeks hot enough to fry an egg. She had listened to every single word Fang Tian said from beginning to end. This is a normal physiological reaction. I am a normal male. I am not a stone, after all. Godmother, you are also responsible. You are too beautiful. Su-won bit her lower lip and buried her face in her knees. He actually said she was responsible. If someone else had said that, she probably would have felt the other person was shirking responsibility. But coming from Fang Tian's mouth, for some reason, she couldn't get angry at all. Because when he said you are too beautiful, his tone was so serious. It wasn't slick flattery or a guilty excuse, but that kind of straightforward, almost unadorned, resolute declaration. Moreover, Fang Tian said she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. It wasn't that Su-won had never heard compliments before. Colleagues at work and friends she met at occasional gatherings would all praise her for being in good condition, looking young, and taking good care of herself. But she always felt those were just polite social pleasantries. She was 35, how good could she look? But when Fang Tian said this, it wasn't in a social setting, and it wasn't polite small talk. He was standing on the other side of a door, speaking to a godmother he had scared away, earnestly saying, "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." How could she be angry at words like that? Su-won lifted her flushed face from her knees, staring at the door panel in front of her, her thoughts racing. Fang Tian said it was his first time being in such close proximity to such a beautiful woman as her, and he couldn't control himself. Fang Tian said she looked even better in her yoga outfit than in a floral dress. Fang Tian said he had never had any dirty thoughts about her, it was just the adrenaline acting up. Fang Tian was still waiting outside the door for her forgiveness. Su-won let out a soft breath. She wasn't angry anymore. No, that wasn't right, she hadn't been angry in the first place. She was just startled, embarrassed, and didn't know how to face him. But Fang Tian's explanation made her feel quite warmed. He didn't run away, didn't pretend nothing happened, but instead took the initiative to knock on her door and honestly and sincerely explained everything to her. He even managed to compliment her several times while apologizing. When did he become so good with words? Su-won climbed up from the bed. She had actually already forgiven Fang Tian. No, she had never blamed Fang Tian at all. But the problem was, how to bring it up. Open the door directly and say, "It's okay, Godmother forgives you." No, that was too awkward. Her face was still flushed, if she opened the door and Fang Tian saw her, it would be too embarrassing. After thinking for a while, Su-won, as if possessed, turned and walked into the walk-in closet. She pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside, several pairs of stockings were folded neatly. There were nude ones, black ones, and a few pairs with lace patterns. She usually wore them when she had to wear formal attire for work, but occasionally left them unused because the weather was too hot or she was just feeling lazy. She picked a pair from the drawer. They were black, with lace trim extending from the top of the stockings to the middle of her thigh. The texture was silky and delicate, cool to the touch in her hand, as thin as a cicada's wing. Looking at the stockings in her hand, Suwon's heart began to race again. While she was struggling in the room just now, she suddenly remembered a post she had seen online, which said that if a young man had a physiological reaction, one could give him a private item to take care of it himself. At the time, she had just flipped through it casually, thinking it was nonsense from a clickbait account, and hadn't taken it seriously at all. But now, Fang Tian was still outside the door. Little Fang Tian was probably still standing at attention. If Fang Tian took care of it himself, it should go down, right? She couldn't just let Fang Tian wait like that forever. Suwon clutched the stockings in her hand and walked to the door. Her fingers rested on the door lock, hesitating for 3 seconds, then, steeling herself, she opened the door a crack. She only opened it a crack, about 10 centimeters wide. She reached her hand through the crack, her hand trembling slightly, her fingertips quivering. "Tian Tian, take this." Fang Tian saw a fair hand reach out from the crack in the door, clutching a bundle of black, silky fabric. He took it instinctively. It was cool and slippery to the touch. He unfolded it to look. A pair of black lace-trimmed stockings. They weren't new, they had been worn, because they seemed to still retain a faint scent of body wash, exactly the same as the scent on Suwon. Fang Tian's brain stalled for half a second. "Godmother, this is... You take this, to solve it?" Suwon's voice came from the crack in the door, small and muffled, carrying a hint of shyness that was almost burning up. "The internet said, this can help solve it." After she finished speaking, the door closed. This time it wasn't locked, just gently shut. But Suwon leaned against the back of the door, her heart beating so fast it felt like it would explode. What had she just done? She had shoved a pair of stockings she had worn into Fang Tian's hands, telling Fang Tian to take them and solve it himself. Suwon buried her face in her hands, crouching behind the door. "Suwon, oh Suwon, have you gone crazy?" But she couldn't think of any other way at the time. She couldn't just let Fang Tian stand there like that. Besides, Fang Tian's explanation was so sincere, and she had already forgiven him, so helping him out a little wasn't a big deal. Yeah, just helping. Just like how Fang Tian helped her stretch her legs, she was just helping Fang Tian solve a little problem. Fang Tian stood outside the door, looking down at the black lace stockings in his hand. The stockings shimmered with a soft glow under the warm yellow light of the living room. The lace patterns on the cuffs were exquisite and sexy, and they felt silky and delicate in his hand, creating a subtle contrast in tactile sensation against his fingers. He looked up at the tightly closed door, then looked down at the stockings in his hand again. Suwon gave him stockings to let him solve it himself. Fang Tian took a deep breath and confirmed a fact. Suwon seemed to like him a little more than he had thought. You have to know, this was Suwon's intimate garment, and to give it to him just like that meant that deep down, Suwon didn't actually reject him using this item for such things. It was just that Suwon herself hadn't realized this emotion. He whispered to the crack in the door, "Thank you, Godmother." From inside the door came a muffled hum, as if she had buried her face in a quilt. Fang Tian carefully folded the stockings and put them in his pocket. He should probably leave now. Use them. Don't use them. Use them. Don't use them. Fang Tian's thoughts kept switching back and forth. Just as Fang Tian was about to leave the door, from inside the door came Suwon's low voice again, "After you're done, just throw them away." Go. Godmother has other things she can give you. Chapter 16, Is it good to use? Fang Tian returned to the bedroom, sat on the bed, took the ball of black lace stockings out of his pocket, and placed them by the pillow. Under the warm light of the bedside lamp, the stockings shimmered softly. The lace pattern at the cuffs was exquisite and sexy, feeling silky and delicate to the touch, so thin they were almost weightless. He could even imagine what these stockings would look like on Suwon. Wrapping around those plump, fair thighs, with the lace trim clinging faintly to the tops of her legs, paired with her floral dress or that white yoga outfit, the image was quite impactful. Use them? Or not? In his past life, he had never used this sort of thing. But the original owner of this body had used them quite a bit. Memories of the sensation of using this thing still remained, and it was indeed very comfortable, which was why he felt a tiny bit tempted. But soon, reason took the high ground. It wasn't because he was particularly noble. It was purely because he felt that, having transmigrated into such a paradise world where there were more women than men, having to use this thing to solve personal problems was just too embarrassing. Fang Tian stuffed the stockings under his pillow, patted it, then lay down on the bed and silently recited in his mind. System Mall. The electronic light screen unfolded in front of him in response. The page was still ridiculously simple. At the very top of the screen were only the two words mall, and below were two options, cash mall and attribute points mall. Fang Tian first clicked on the cash mall. A dazzling list of products appeared. Coca-Cola for 3 yuan, Pepsi for 3 yuan, sweet tofu pudding for 5.5, savory tofu pudding for 5, Red Bull for 6, Master Kong braised beef noodles for 3.5 a pack. They were all daily consumables, and the prices were about the same as on Earth. Just as Fang Tian was about to exit to check the attribute points mall, his brain suddenly reacted. Wait, no. He sat up abruptly and looked through the list again from the beginning. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Master Kong braised beef noodles, Laogan Ma, Wangzhe milk, Wulong spicy strips, Kia sunflower seeds. This world didn't have any of these things. This world had cola, but it wasn't Coca-Cola or Pepsi, it was a brand called Sarsaparilla. Fang Tian had drunk it. The taste was far inferior, cloyingly sweet, and the carbonation wasn't right either. At the time, he had sighed, thinking that the cola in this parallel world was just like that. Instant noodles existed too, but the brands were different, and the recipe for the seasoning packets was not on the same level. But now, the recipe for Coca-Cola was right before his eyes. Fang Tian scrolled the list all the way to the bottom. Coca-Cola production recipe, 8 million yuan. Pepsi production recipe, 8 million yuan. Master Kong braised beef noodles recipe, 5 million yuan. Sure enough, there were recipes. And cheaper than he imagined. A few million didn't seem like a small amount, but who was he? He had memories of two worlds in his head and knew the commercial value of these brands. After getting the recipes, whether he found a factory to manufacture them, partnered with investors, or sold the recipes to big companies, no matter how he operated, an investment of a few million could easily multiply dozens or hundreds of times in minutes. Fang Tian's heart accelerated. He clicked on the Pepsi icon. A prompt box popped up, accumulated attribute points have not reached the standard, temporarily locked. It was gray. All the recipe icons were gray. Unlike those daily consumables which were green and could be purchased directly. Fang Tian clicked on a few more. Coca-Cola recipe, Laogan Ma recipe, Wangzhe milk recipe all popped up the same prompt. So, to unlock the recipes, he must first earn enough attribute points here in the system. Fang Tian's mood slowly fell from ecstasy. Getting rich was fine, but it had to be done step by step. The system was afraid he would reach the pinnacle of life too early and had intentionally set a threshold. Forget it, let's check the attribute points mall first. He clicked on the attribute point small. Then he froze. It wasn't that the items were bad. It was just that these things, their names were too abstract. Loyalty necklace. Obedience handcuffs. Ambient light strip. Sweet aromatherapy. And some skills, like hypnosis. Time stop. Fang Tian looked from top to bottom, from left to right, the frequency of his mouth twitching getting faster and faster. No, what the hell are these things? Loyalty necklace? Obedience necklace? Time stop? What exactly is going on with this system? Is it trying to lead him down the path of a beast? And it prepared all 18 martial arts at once. Fortunately, the items in the attribute point small were insanely expensive. The cheapest was that sensitivity spray, which also cost 20 attribute points. He didn't have enough to meet the unlocking threshold even with everything he had now, he couldn't afford to buy them even if he wanted to. Fang Tian slapped himself in his mind. Still thinking about buying? Not buying. First, raise his personal attributes. X ability is only 11.94 centimeters, still far from the passing line. He closed the system mall with complicated feelings. Things will work out in the end, let's not think about it for now. Tomorrow he still had to see the doctor. He tucked the stockings further under the pillow, turned over, and closed his eyes. The system settlement arrived late. Congratulations to the host for completing the option, received reward, attribute points +2, cash 2000 yuan, has been deposited into your bank card. Tian Tian, wake up. We have to see the doctor today. Before 9 in the morning, Fang Tian heard Su Wan's warm and soft voice by his ear. He opened his eyes and saw Su Wan sitting on the floor by the bed, one hand supporting her chin, looking at him with a pair of apricot eyes. Today she was wearing a creamy white short-sleeved knit sweater, with the hem tucked into a pair of khaki high-waisted wide-leg trousers, a thin belt tied around her waist, revealing a section of her slender, soft waist. Her hair was let down, slightly curled at the ends, with light makeup on. And her lips coated in a thin layer of lip glaze, shiny and bright. Today's style was intellectual and gentle. But the level of attractiveness hadn't diminished at all. Awake? Get up and have breakfast. Su Wan reached out and patted Fang Tian on the head. The movement was as natural as if she had done it countless times, her palm warm and soft. Fang Tian nodded subconsciously, feeling a sense of relief in his heart. Fortunately, Su Wan's attitude was no different from yesterday's. Patting his head, speaking softly, sitting on the floor waiting for him to wake up, everything was about the same as yesterday morning. It seemed that the explanation and choice last night were both correct. Okay, I'll go wash up. Fang Tian sat up, threw off the quilt, and prepared to get out of bed. Then he forgot that morning is when a man is at his most spirited. Little Fang Tian, after a night's rest, was standing tall and proud, saluting the sun. Ah! Be careful! Why is that thing so spirited in the morning? Su Wan exclaimed and hurriedly covered her eyes with her hands. But the gap between her fingers was a bit wide, and she had screamed before covering them. Everything that should have been seen had been seen. The fingers covering her eyes parted slightly, revealing half a face flushed red, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up, and she actually took the time to tease him. Fang Tian hurriedly pulled the quilt back to cover his lower body, his face looking uncharacteristically embarrassed. Godmother. This is a normal phenomenon, please don't tease me. Fang Tian, of course, didn't know about Su Wan's internal monologue. Su Wan had thought a lot in the bedroom last night. She had wrapped herself in the quilt, thinking from 9 o'clock until midnight, and finally figured the whole thing out. This child, Fang Tian, had never had a girlfriend since he was young, and after graduating from college, he had encountered such a huge change, got sick, and locked himself in the house for 2 years without going out. He must have been stifled. Having never had intimate contact with a girl, and living day and night with a female like his godmother, having a reaction was completely normal. It wasn't that he had any bad intentions, it was purely because he was young, vigorous, and full of blood. So, as his godmother, how should she handle this matter? She couldn't hide. If she hid, he would feel even more awkward and inferior, thinking he had done something unforgivable. She couldn't scold him either. If she scolded him, he would get hurt, and the sunny mindset he had worked so hard to build would be beaten back to its original state. Then what was the right thing to do? She had to guide him in the right way. Once he had released enough, he wouldn't be so easily aroused. By then, she would introduce him to a girlfriend, and his life would be completely back on track. Last night's poking incident was just a small interlude before Fang Tian moved toward a normal life. As his godmother, she couldn't avoid it, she had to face it with Tian Tian. Therefore, she had to treat Fang Tian even better. She couldn't let him feel rejected. She couldn't let him have any psychological burden. This was the underlying logic for everything Su Wan did and said today. A product of a clever little brain that had spun in her head all night, felt more and more reasonable the more she thought about it. And finally convinced herself. All right, I won't tease you. Godmother will go out first, you go change your clothes. Su Wan stood up, walked 2 steps toward the door, then stopped. She turned around, 2 rosy clouds floating on her face, her lips moved, she hesitated for a second, but ultimately asked. Tian Tian, was that of Godmother's, good to use? Once the words were out, her face turned completely red, burning from her cheeks to her ears, and even her neck was dyed pink. But her eyes did not dodge, still looking at Fang Tian. Since she had figured it out, and had decided to guide him properly, she couldn't be coy. She had to care openly and ask openly. It was just that her fingers were quietly twisting the hem of her knit sweater, betraying her nervousness. Fang Tian froze. Godmother, you gave me the stockings yesterday to handle it myself, and today, first thing in the morning, you ask me if they were good to use. Is this right? This isn't right, is it? Chapter 17, The Beautiful Doctor. Fang Tian hadn't yet figured out how to answer when the system's multiple-choice question popped up again. Facing Godmother's question, what is your choice? 1. Take the stockings out from under the pillow, throw them on the floor, and scold, Pa. Is sneaking around something a real man would do? I didn't use them at all last night. 2. Lift the quilt again and lecherously smile, they work well, but look at the situation now, what should we do? 3. Stand on the bed, point at her, and loudly demand, do you have any shame, you old witch? Asking a 20-something young man about this topic? Get lost, quickly. 4. Choose to tell a little lie, telling Godmother that you used them and they worked very well. 5. Answer truthfully, didn't use them. Fang Tian hesitated between options 4 and 5 for 3 seconds. Choosing 5 to tell the truth, he worried it would hurt Su Wan. She took the initiative to give him the stockings, which in itself showed how long she must have agonized before working up the courage. If he let her know that she had spent all night carefully preparing something that he hadn't even touched, she might think that her way of helping was wrong, or that he found her disgusting. Since she asked, she definitely wanted to get a positive answer. Choosing 4 was a lie, but this lie was well-intentioned. It could put Su Wan at ease, and the satisfaction of being needed would also make her happy. Fang Tian pretended to stutter slightly, his gaze darting away. They work well, Godmother. Very well. Su Wan's face turned even redder, but her eyes brightened, that's good. She turned to open the door, and when she walked outside, she looked back at Fang Tian. In that look, there was shyness, relief, and a little bit of joy from being affirmed. The door closed gently. Fang Tian sat on the bed, pricking up his ears to listen to the footsteps outside the door. He didn't know if it was his imagination, but Su Wan's last two steps seemed exceptionally light. Congratulations to the host for completing the option. Reward received, attribute points +1, 500 yuan in cash, already deposited into your bank card. He looked down at the corner of black lace peeking out from under the pillow, then glanced at the tightly closed door, his lips slowly curling up. It seems, there's a chance? There's a chance. He asked and answered himself in his heart. Stuffed the stockings back under the pillow, and got up to wash up. Adding attribute points can wait until I get back from the hospital. I'll see if I can rake in another wave. Gasu Guangji Hospital. The only public grade 3A psychiatric hospital in Gasu. The original owner last came here half a year ago. But regardless of his past life or his previous self, he was quite familiar with psychiatric hospitals. There's no need to mention the previous self, he was a patient himself. And in his past life, one of his childhood friends developed depression due to the pain of losing his wife and daughter. Before, he was the person accompanying others to see a doctor, but today he was the one seeing the doctor. Although he was already cured. Su Wan had booked an appointment on her phone in advance with the doctor who had always been examining Fang Tian. The two arrived at the hospital and sat on a bench in the waiting area for a few minutes. The hospital corridor was filled with a faint smell of disinfectant, the walls were painted light green, and sunlight spilled in through the window at the end of the corridor, drawing a bright square on the floor. Fang Tian, are you here? Fang Tian. A nurse holding a medical record folder stood at the door of the consultation room and called out. Go on. Su Wan patted Fang Tian's arm. Godmother, aren't you coming in? The doctor said to talk to you alone first. Godmother will wait for you outside. I'll go in later. Fang Tian stood up and walked toward the door of the consultation room. Before pushing the door open, he took a deep breath. The door pushed open. Then he froze at the door for a full 2 seconds. The consultation room was not big, with one office desk, 2 chairs, a computer, and a filing cabinet. The curtains were half open, and sunlight leaked through the gaps in the blinds, casting mottled light and shadows on the desk. But Fang Tian didn't notice any of this at all. All his attention was focused on the woman standing behind the office desk, flipping through a medical record. She looked to be in her early 30s, with a standard oval face, long and neat dark eyebrows slightly furrowed, and a temperament between her brows that was as pitiable as she clutching her heart. Her pair of peach blossom eyes, even without any emotional fluctuation, seemed to naturally exude a charming aura. A pair of vintage snake-bone gold-rimmed glasses rested on her high bridge of the nose, with light shimmering behind the lenses. Her lips were thin as willow leaves, rosy and full, with the corners of her mouth slightly pursed. A thick head of black hair cascaded down like a waterfall, hanging behind her shoulders. The ends of her hair had a slight curl, and a few strands of loose hair clung to her temples, making her skin look dazzlingly white. She was wearing a white coat on the outside, left open, revealing the women's blouse underneath. The blouse was light blue, tailored to perfection, and was stretched into a perfect arc by her full breasts. The top 2 buttons of the blouse were undone, revealing a deep cleavage between her breasts and large areas of fair skin on both sides. That whiteness was exceptionally alluring against the backdrop of the light blue blouse. Her hands hung at her sides, her lotus root arms round and fair, her 10 fingers long and slender like jade onions, holding a medical record in front of her chest. Following down from her flat abdomen, the lines of her waist suddenly tapered inward from the ribs, turning into a wasp waist that could barely be grasped. Fang Tian used his critical gaze to estimate, this waist was ridiculously thin, and he didn't know how it supported the fullness in front. The body curve suddenly expanded behind the waist. On the lower body was a pair of cyan trousers, the fabric soft and form-fitting, tightly wrapping her plump, mature buttocks. The two round arcs were exceptionally eye-catching under the outline of the trousers, forming a peach shape that one couldn't take their eyes off. Fang Tian visually measured it. Her gluts were extremely full and thick, and the cross-section was probably wider than her shoulders. This made an old saying pop into Fang Tian's mind: if the hips are wider than the shoulders, life is like a god's. He subconsciously felt a trace of envy for this doctor's husband, whom he had never met. A woman with such beautiful peach-like buttocks naturally wouldn't lack a pair of beautiful legs. She was tall and plump. Fang Tian estimated she was about 1.75 meters tall, only a little shorter than him. Her two long legs accounted for an absolute proportion of her height. Her thighs were plump and round, her calves long and straight, and the ratio of thigh to calf was perfect, not inferior even among international supermodels. The hem of the white coat just covered the middle of her thighs, revealing the lines of her calves wrapped in cyan trousers. She stood in front of the window, her body leaning slightly forward, the lapels of her white coat hanging naturally. Those peach blossom eyes lifted from the medical record, looking toward the door through the snake-bone gold-rimmed glasses. The moment her gaze swept over, Fang Tian felt as if he had been gently pushed on the chest by an invisible hand. Every detail of this woman was exuding a deadly temptation, a mix of intelligence and sexiness. Wearing a white coat, yet making people's imaginations run wild. "It's Fang Tian, right? Come in and sit." Her voice was gentle and steady, with the composure unique to a doctor. After saying this, she also sat down in her chair. "Hello, doctor." Fang Tian snapped out of it, withdrew his gaze, walked into the consultation room, and sat down in the chair opposite the desk. His movements were natural, and his expression was well managed, showing no signs of losing his composure. But his brain was working frantically. Su Wan was already beautiful enough to be distracting. How could he run into a beautiful doctor of this level just for a checkup for depression? Was the beauty level of women in this world generally higher? And this doctor was not Dr. Wu. Dr. Wu was the attending physician who had always been examining Fang Tian before, a bald middle-aged uncle who spoke slowly and liked to twirl his fountain pen when writing prescriptions. Fang Tian had originally booked his appointment today. Zhang Ting lowered her head and flipped through the medical record in her hand, her slender fingers sliding across the pages. Sitting opposite her, Fang Tian's peripheral vision inevitably swept to her neckline. Her slightly bent posture made the blouse's neckline open a bit more, and that expanse of snowy white and deep cleavage was presented quite openly before his eyes. He hurriedly shifted his gaze to her face. Safe zone. But her face wasn't safe either. Even if those peach blossom eyes were just staring at the medical record, it seemed like they were inviting something. The last follow-up was half a year ago, right? Zhang Ting lifted her head, closed the medical record, and took off her glasses, placing them to the side. After taking off those vintage snake-bone gold-rimmed glasses, her peach blossom eyes were even harder to hide. Between the shifting of her gaze, there was a natural, innate charm. It wasn't the kind of deliberate flirting, but rather, even if she did nothing, those eyes were naturally born that way. "Yes. How have you been feeling lately?" "A lot better." Fang Tian smiled politely, like an obedient patient. Chapter 18, Take off your shirt first. Zhang Ting rested her hands on the medical record, leaning forward slightly, and spoke in a relaxed, conversational tone. "Is the person who came with you outside your sister or your girlfriend?" "She's quite pretty." "She's my godmother." Fang Tian smiled. Perhaps due to the lingering memories of the original owner, he subconsciously felt a bit apprehensive about the medical profession, and his fingers involuntarily rubbed against his knees as he answered. However, he quickly adjusted his state of mind and pushed those bad memories of the original owner back down. He came for a follow-up today, hoping to get an officially certified good result, which would make it easier for him to find a job later. So, no matter what the doctor asked, he would just cooperate. Hearing the words godmother, Zhang Ting was slightly stunned. That woman outside was unbelievably beautiful, with exquisite features and extremely well-maintained skin. She looked like she was only in her early 20s. She hadn't expected her to be about the same age as herself. That was truly rare. That's great. It's clear that she treats you very well. Jiang Ting nodded, walked around from behind her desk, and approached Fang Tian. As she walked, her hips, wrapped in cyan trousers, swayed slightly, and the hem of her white coat fluttered gently. Come, follow me over here to do some basic checks. Fang Tian stood up and followed behind Jiang Ting toward the examination area in the corner of the clinic. His gaze inevitably fell upon her back. The white coat accentuated the exquisite curves of her figure. As she walked, the hem swayed gently, occasionally revealing the lines of her calves wrapped in cyan trousers, looking very fair and soft. He sighed silently to himself. A depression follow-up is just a follow-up. Why is a physical examination necessary? Fang Tian stood next to the instruments in the examination area. In the corner stood an examination bed covered with disposable paper, next to which were an electronic scale and a blood pressure monitor, with a stethoscope and some basic examination tools hanging on the wall. Jiang Ting walked behind him, and her voice came from behind, "Take off your shirt first." Fang Tian. Wait, isn't this follow-up procedure going a bit too far? Does a physical exam require taking off clothes? The system, though late, arrived. Facing the beautiful doctor's request to take off your clothes, your choices are: 1. Take off all your clothes without a word, then casually ask, "Do you want me to take off my pants too? Should I take off my underwear as well?" 2. Turn around and leave, and give her a middle finger before you go. 3. Say lecherously, "Taking off clothes is boring. I have something better to see, want to take a look?" 4. Ask the doctor to provide a reasonable explanation for taking off your clothes. Even without the system's options, Fang Tian would have chosen 4. Because he truly had questions. "Doctor, let me ask 2 questions first." Fang Tian didn't take off his shirt immediately. He turned around to face Jiang Ting, his tone polite but his stance clear. "First, why do I need to take off my shirt for a follow-up? Second, I booked an appointment with Dr. Wu, so why are you the one seeing me today? Then let me answer your second question first." Jiang Ting didn't mind being questioned. On the contrary, she found this patient much more interesting than described in the medical record. The file said taciturn, avoids eye contact, and low cooperation with treatment. The person in front of her spoke clearly, had a firm gaze, and even took the initiative to ask questions. Dr. Wu switched jobs and went to a private hospital with better benefits. He's already in his 40s and needs to plan for his next steps. "My name is Jiang Ting, you can call me Dr. Jiang. I returned from advanced studies in the psychiatry department at the University Hospital of Munich in Germany. You can rest assured regarding my professional capabilities, I am definitely not inferior to Dr. Wu." She spoke in a calm and determined tone, her peach blossom eyes looking at Fang Tian through her lenses with a hint of professional scrutiny. As for the first question, Jiang Ting paused, picked up the medical record to flip through it, then looked up at Fang Tian. "I have carefully studied your medical record. During your follow-up 6 months ago, your Hamilton Depression Rating Scale score was as high as 24 points, indicating severe depression, and you showed clear suicidal ideation during the assessment. Regarding weight, 6 months ago you weighed 184 jin, seemingly accompanied by a habit of long-term binge eating, but your weight now looks much more normal." She closed the medical record and walked up to Fang Tian, the distance between them shortening to less than a meter. Fang Tian could smell the faint scent of disinfectant on her, along with a subtle, elusive hint of perfume coming from beneath her white coat. "But after talking with you today, I find that your state is like a completely different person from what is described in the medical record. Your speech is logical, your thinking is coherent, Your speaking speed is normal, your tone has inflection, and there is no hesitation or avoidance. Your eye contact is normal, without dodging. You even dare to look me straight in the eye. Jiang Ting's lips curled slightly. In my experience, patients recovering from severe depression usually keep their heads down and don't speak, or only respond with nods and shakes when meeting a new doctor for the first time. You are not. She picked up the medical record again and pointed to the weight data recorded on it. 6 months ago, you were 184 jin. But judging by my estimation today, you have lost at least 40 jin. This recovery speed is extremely rare in clinical psychiatry. As expected of someone who returned from advanced studies in Germany, her observation skills were quite sharp. However, he hadn't lost 40 jin in the last 2 months, he had gained over 30 jin. Therefore, I need to perform a comprehensive physical examination. Jiang Ting closed the medical record in her hand and placed it on the operating table nearby, including weight, blood pressure, heart rate, heart and lung auscultation, and visual inspection of skin and muscle condition. Binge eating is a very unhealthy habit. This state can cause damage to multiple body systems. I need to personally evaluate your current physical condition to further objectively judge your level of recovery. She reached out and pointed to Fang Tian's t-shirt, her tone professional and calm. Take off your shirt. I am a doctor, and you are a patient. In my eyes, there are only body parts that need to be examined, nothing else. Every reason was above board, and every explanation was reasonable. If Fang Tian refused again, it would make it look like he had something to hide. Fortunately, he had persisted in exercising for the past 2 months, although his ABS hadn't developed yet, at least his ribs were no longer so prominent. Fang Tian grabbed the hem of his t-shirt and lifted it up. He took off the t-shirt, revealing his upper body. Jiang Ting's gaze swept across his body, then stopped. She had originally expected to see a patient with sagging skin and obvious stretch marks on various parts of his body. But the scene before her was completely different from what she had expected. Fang Tian's shoulders already had a basic outline, although his collarbones were still quite prominent. It wasn't the sharp, protruding sensation of being in a malnourished state, but rather the lines of a normal, lean physique. His pectoral muscles had the beginnings of a shape, his abdomen was flat and firm, without any sagging loose skin, and the outlines of muscles could be faintly seen on his arms. His skin color was normal, ruddy, and lustrous, without a single stretch mark. There were also none of the skin problems that patients who are bedridden for a long time are prone to. Jiang Ting was stunned for a moment, then quickly resumed her professional expression. But Fang Tian caught that momentary lapse. She didn't say anything more and pointed to the scale. Weigh yourself first. Fang Tian stepped on it. The numbers on the electronic display jumped a few times and finally settled at 134 jin. Maybe he had eaten too well these past few days and gained a little more weight. Jiang Ting made a note in the medical record. Blood pressure. Jiang Ting picked up the blood pressure monitor and wrapped the cuff around Fang Tian's upper arm. Her fingers inevitably touched the skin of Fang Tian's arm during the operation. Her nails were trimmed neatly, and the touch was slightly cool and professional. The blood pressure monitor automatically inflated and tightened, then slowly deflated. The numbers on the display stabilized. Systolic pressure 118, diastolic pressure 75. A completely normal range. Heart rate. Jiang Ting inserted the earpieces of the stethoscope into her ears and slid the chest piece under Fang Tian's collarbone. The moment the cool metal touch pressed against his chest, Fang Tian drew a breath but didn't move. Jiang Ting stood directly in front of him, close enough that he could see a small mole behind her ear and the muscle lines on her neck that were slightly taut from concentration. Heart rate normal, no murmurs. Breath sounds clear, no rales. Jiang Ting straightened up and made another note in the medical record. Then came skin elasticity, muscle tone, and joint range of motion. Fang Tian cooperated by performing a few simple movements, extending his arms, making a fist, and turning around. Zhangting performed every step with extra care. When her fingers pressed on different parts of his arms, the time they lingered was longer than a routine examination, as if she were repeatedly confirming something. But her expression became increasingly determined. Every examination was telling her the same conclusion. Finally, she went behind Fang Tian and lightly pressed down along his spine from top to bottom with 2 fingers. His spine was straight, with no tenderness. "All right, you can put your clothes back on." Zhangting put down the stethoscope, walked back behind the desk, and sat down. She lowered her head to look at the dense records in the medical record book and was silent for a few seconds. Fang Tian pulled his t-shirt back on and sat back down opposite her. Zhangting looked up, her peach blossom eyes staring at him through her lenses for quite a while, with something beyond professional scrutiny in her gaze, curiosity. "Fang Tian, your physical examination results are all normal. Completely normal. Except for your weight, which is still in the lean range, but given your physical condition 6 months ago, your current state can be called a textbook example of recovery." She paused, took off her glasses and placed them next to the medical record, leaned forward slightly, rested her hands on the table, and a gleam of inquiry flashed in her peach blossom eyes. "To be honest, I'm a bit surprised. Recovering from severe depression accompanied by binge eating to a near normal level usually requires a long and tortuous process. And you only took less than half a year, and without hospitalization. If Dr. Wu knew he missed such a case when he switched jobs, he would probably regret it." She picked up her pen and wrote a few lines on the medical record. Then she looked up again. "Can you tell me, how did you do it over the past 6 months?" Fang Tian looked at Zhangting's peach blossom eyes, which were filled with curiosity, and thought, "I can't exactly tell you that I swapped souls." Chapter 19, Zhangting's Curiosity and Inquiry. Congratulations to the host for completing the option. Reward received, 1000 yuan in cash, which has been deposited into your bank card. Just cash, no attribute points. It seems that option 4, ask the doctor for a reasonable explanation, was indeed too conservative. But Fang Tian was in no rush. Haste makes waste. Being impatient would only make it easier to get a beating. However, the system was exceptionally enthusiastic today. The previous option had just been settled, and the dialog box hadn't even disappeared when a new multiple-choice question popped up. Triggered consecutively. It seems Zhangting is very much to the system's liking. Fang Tian muttered to himself, the dog system, it was already active enough when encountering Su Wan, why is it even more energized when encountering Zhangting? Its aesthetic range is quite broad, eating up everything from gentle homebodies to intellectual career women. Faced with the doctor's earnest inquiry, your choice is 1. Directly admit that you are Fang Tian from Earth, a soul transmigrator who possesses a system. 2. Giggle and say lecherously, "Doctor, you want to know my secret too? Come here and let me take a look. Then I'll tell you." 3. Beat around the bush and say the weather is nice today. 4. Find a way to muddle through. Fang Tian scanned the 4 options quickly and keenly noticed a change. The phrasing of some options was different from before. In the past, the system options would write out the specific dialogue, and he only needed to follow them, like an actor reading lines. But these last 2 times, some options only set requirements without providing lines, leaving the rest to his own improvisation. It seems that after the system activated the shop, its operating logic was also quietly iterating and upgrading. The freedom was higher, but the requirements for his improvisation were also higher. Option 1 was pure suicide. Soul transmigration plus a system was his biggest secret. Saying it out loud would either get him locked in a ward as a delusionist or treated as a psychotic and given higher dosages of medication. He wanted to get a normal diagnosis and go back today. Option 2 was sexual harassment, and option 3 was a confession. Beating around the bush in front of a woman of Zhang Ting's caliber was equivalent to having 3 big words carved on his forehead: I have skeletons in my closet. He had to choose 4. Fang Tian's brain worked at high speed for half a second, then he made a decision. To answer this question using the true mental journey of a depression patient. After talking with Dr. Wu last time, I thought a lot. Fang Tian's voice was lower than before, and his speaking speed slowed down, as if he were carefully pushing open a long dusty door. Dr. Wu said something to me at the time. He said, "You are still young, your future shouldn't just live in the grief of the past." This sentence was indeed said by Dr. Wu. The original owner's memory had this fragment, although he hadn't listened to it at all back then. I thought about this sentence repeatedly after I went back. Later, one day, I was standing at the window and saw a father holding his daughter's hand for a walk downstairs. The little girl had 2 pigtails and was laughing very happily. I suddenly thought of my dad. Fang Tian's Adam's apple moved when he said this. He had initially planned to rely purely on acting skills, but when he flipped to a certain fragment in the original owner's memory, his emotions suddenly surged uncontrollably. The original owner's father was an ordinary middle-aged man, slightly chubby, and loved to laugh. Every winter, he would take the original owner to the bathhouse and brag foolishly to acquaintances that his son had been admitted to Jinghai University. The day before his accident, he had called to ask if he was coming home for the weekend, saying he had bought crabs. The original owner said no, he had an interview on the weekend. If the original owner had gone home at that time, he likely would have been trapped in the fire as well. This memory didn't belong to the Fang Tian from Earth. But the 2 memories had coexisted in the same brain for so long that there was no longer a clear boundary between them. The original owner's regrets, guilt, and pain welled up unconsciously as he narrated. I feel like I should become stronger. My parents definitely wouldn't want me to keep living like this. Fang Tian's voice choked, and his eye sockets actually became wet. I wasn't able to go back when they left. I should live better to be worthy of them. He couldn't continue, lowered his head, and pinched the bridge of his nose with his thumb and index finger. Zhang Ting didn't make a sound. The consultation room was quiet for a few seconds, quiet enough to hear the sound of the wheels of the nurse's cart passing by in the corridor outside the window. Then she pulled out a few tissues and handed them over. Okay, no need to say any more. I understand how you feel. Her voice was much softer than before, the scrutiny in her peach blossom eyes was gone, replaced by a gentle empathy. She was a doctor, she was here to help patients solve problems, not to create new ones. Fang Tian's emotional fluctuation was clearly real, continuing to press him would be unprofessional. If his condition relapsed because of her questioning, she would be the sinner. Thank you. Fang Tian took the tissues and dabbed at the corners of his eyes. When he took the tissues, his fingers accidentally touched Zhang Ting's fingers. Her hands were very white and delicate, the pads of her fingers so soft that they didn't feel like a doctor's hands. He thought to himself, Zhang Ting's hands are very well maintained. Zhang Ting withdrew her hand and placed it on the medical record book. She didn't continue to ask, but her gaze when looking at Fang Tian held a few more traces of inquiry. Fang Tian lowered his head to wipe his tears, but his mind had already detached from the recent emotional fluctuation, quickly reviewing his response just now. The effect of mixing acting skills with real memories was indeed the most natural. Zhang Ting was clearly moved and didn't continue to press. This hurdle was considered passed. Then he looked up and found that Zhang Ting was still watching him. To be precise, she was looking at him with the eyes of someone studying a specimen. Her right hand left the medical record book, supporting her chin, her thumb and index finger gently pinching her jawline, her head tilted, her peach blossom eyes slightly narrowed. This posture made the lines of her collarbone even more distinct under the collar of her shirt. Fang Tian, I just reread your medical records. All the records from the initial diagnosis to now. There is one point I haven't been able to figure out. Zhang Ting's hand came down from her chin, her index finger tapping lightly on the medical record book. Your highest weight before was 188 jin. According to common sense, losing dozens of jin in a short period from that weight, the skin would definitely leave obvious stretch marks. Her finger traced a line on her own forearm, just like how a pregnant woman's abdomen will develop stretch marks. After the skin's elastic fibers are overstretched and broken, it is difficult to fully recover. But when you took off your clothes just now. She paused, seemingly thinking of an appropriate way to express it. Your skin is smooth and clean, your shoulders, arms, abdomen, waist, there are no traces of stretch marks at all, not even one. Zhang Ting crossed her hands on the medical record, her body leaning forward slightly, those peach blossom eyes locking onto Fang Tian's gaze through her lenses. This is really unreasonable. Fang Tian's heart jumped violently. Stretch marks. Damn stretch marks. The system should have helped repair his body after he transmigrated. When she stripped him to check just now, she must have found something wrong. No wonder Zhang Ting was so careful when she checked his skin earlier. With her fingers lingering on his chest and abdomen for so long. Careless. Fang Tian slammed on the brakes in his heart. His brain entered emergency mode, running at high speed for a fraction of a second, then he pretended to be calm, spread his hands, and smiled as he met Zhang Ting's scrutinizing gaze. If even Dr. Zhang can't figure out the problem, then as a patient, I naturally can't figure it out even more. Shouldn't I be asking you this? How did my skin recover so well? He threw the question back, his tone relaxed, and he even tilted his head slightly, making an expression of I'm also confused, but this has nothing to do with me. Zhang Ting didn't speak, just looked at him like that. For a long time. But what kind of person was Fang Tian? A chosen worker in his past life, a programmer who stared at screens for 10+ hours a day. He hadn't changed his expression even in front of code, so what was a few minutes of her staring? He met Zhang Ting's gaze calmly, with no evasion in his expression, nor the tension of over-defensiveness, just composure. Eventually, Zhang Ting withdrew her gaze first. She smiled lightly, that smile was very brief, the arc of her lips appeared and then receded, replaced by a professional, peaceful expression. That's true. You are a patient, I can't expect you to make a differential diagnosis for yourself. All right, let's do a scale first. She took a printed Hamilton Depression Rating Scale from the drawer and handed it to Fang Tian. Fang Tian took it and glanced at it. He had done this thing too many times. His predecessor did it, and he did it to accompany his childhood friend in his past life. 20-something questions, about mood, sleep, appetite, guilt, suicidal ideation, each item scored by degree, and finally aggregated into a total score. Fang Tian picked up the pen and filled it out one by one. He filled it out very seriously, not perfunctorily, but answering with the real state of his current body. Sleep normal, appetite normal, no guilt, no self-harm ideation, looking forward to the future. He deliberated on the wording of each question before writing, ensuring the answer was both true and not overly exaggerated. Zhang Ting sat opposite, waiting quietly. She didn't check her phone, didn't look at other medical records, just sat on the office chair, her fingers resting lightly on the desktop, occasionally spinning the pen in her hand. The lapel of her white coat rose and fell gently with her breathing, and those peach blossom eyes scanned Fang Tian's profile from time to time through her lenses. It took about 20 minutes for Fang Tian to finish all the questions. He handed the scale back. Dr. Zhang, I'm done. Congratulations to the host for completing the option. Reward received, attribute points +2, 3,000 yuan in cash, which has been deposited into your bank card. Fang Tian's hand holding the pen paused slightly, then he handed the pen back as if nothing had happened. It actually popped 2 attribute points. Maybe it was because his improvisation was good, and the system gave extra rewards. Zhang Ting took the scale, read it carefully from beginning to end, and then began to calculate the score in the scoring column on the last page. Her finger slid from top to bottom on the paper, muttering the score of each item, and then wrote the total score in a box. After writing it, she froze for a moment, looked at the score again, and then retrieved the previous scale from the drawer to compare. Placing the two forms together, the one on the left was from 6 months ago, 24 points, with severe depression marked in red pen. On the right was today's. She stared at the comparison of the two forms for several seconds. Everything was normal. Not mild, not remission period. It was normal. More normal than most normal people who came for a routine physical examination. Zhang Ting tucked both scales into the medical record book and looked up at Fang Tian. She had been a doctor for so many years, handled tens of thousands of patients, and no one's recovery curve could compare to Fang Tian's. She had originally come to inquire purely out of professional interest. Now, besides professional interest, there was some other curiosity. "All right, call your godmother in. I'll talk to you both about the follow-up precautions." Zhang Ting stood up, her tone returning to her consistent steady professionalism. "Okay, thank you, Dr. Zhang." Fang Tian stood up, opened the clinic door, and walked out. The door closed gently behind him. Zhang Ting looked at the closed door, her right hand subconsciously supporting her chin again. She stretched out her left hand to flip out the two scales and looked at them again, then closed the medical record book, put it on the edge of the table, and muttered to the empty clinic. "This patient is indeed interesting." There was a flash of light in her peach blossom eyes when she said this. It wasn't the kind of interest a doctor has in a patient. It was the purest desire of a researcher to explore an unknown phenomenon when encountering a good subject. Chapter 20, Dr. Zhang is coming to stay. "Godmother, what did Dr. Zhang tell you just now?" Fang Tian's follow-up examination had not actually ended completely. According to the procedure, after a doctor finishes the examination, they should call the patient and their family member in together to explain follow-up precautions, medication adjustments, and lifestyle advice. Zhang Ting intended to do exactly that. When Fang Tian went out to call Su Wan, she had already outlined the key points she needed to convey in the medical record book. But man proposes, God disposes. Just as Fang Tian led Su Wan into the consulting room and they were about to sit down for a good chat, he suddenly got the urge. An extremely intense, uncontrollable sensation came surging from his lower abdomen. It was probably that cup of soy milk he drank before leaving, which had been brewing in his stomach for too long and finally exploded. "Godmother, you sit first, I'll be right out." Fang Tian forced a calm smile at Su Wan, then dashed out of the consulting room at a speed somewhere between a fast walk and a sprint. When he returned to the door of the consulting room over 10 minutes later with a look of relief, he found that the door was already open. Su Wan was standing at the door of the consulting room, shaking hands with Zhang Ting. Their handshake posture was very formal, and both had polite smiles on their faces. "That's about it, you two go back and prepare," Zhang Ting said. Okay, thank you, Dr. Zhang," Su Wan nodded repeatedly. "Fang Tian. You two finished discussing things behind my back." The whole process took only 10 minutes. During the time he was squatting on the toilet, he, the person involved, was skipped over. He walked to the door of the consulting room, just about to ask, "Do I still need to come in now?" when Zhang Ting raised her hand to check her watch. She then looked up and gave him a polite smile, issuing a swift and clear dismissal. "All right, today's follow-up is over. I have several patients waiting, you two should head back." Fang Tian opened his mouth but couldn't say anything, so he could only slink away after Su Wan. But the moment they stepped out of the hospital gate, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Zhang Ting said, "You two prepare what?" What on earth did the two women talk about in those 10 minutes? Being excluded as the person involved, This feeling was quite ominous. Seeing that Su Wan didn't answer immediately, he pressed further, "Godmother, what exactly did Dr. Zhang tell you? What do you need to prepare?" Su Wan walked alongside him on the sidewalk outside the hospital. The early summer sunlight filtered through the sycamore leaves onto her, casting dappled light and shadows on her creamy white knitted sweater. She carried Fang Tian's medical record bag in her hand, walking slowly, and it was clear she was in a good mood. "Oh, Dr. Zhang said your test results today are very good. The scale scores are completely normal, and all the physical examination indicators meet the standards. She said your recovery is very good, which is very rare among the cases she has handled." Su Wan's tone was filled with obvious relief, the corners of her mouth were upturned, as were the corners of her eyes, and she radiated an inexplicable sense of pride from head to toe. Fang Tian breathed a sigh of relief. The results were good, everything was normal, this was exactly what he wanted. He could go back and look for a job. But Su Wan changed the subject, and her footsteps stopped. Fang Tian's heart tightened again. The two most feared words in life are but and furthermore. Especially but, which ranks first? Dr. Zhang initially suggested that we stay in the hospital for a week of observation. She said that recovering from severe depression to a normal level requires a consolidation period, and inpatient observation can ensure nothing goes wrong. Hospitalization. Fang Tian frowned. "Godmother, you definitely helped me refuse that, right? Hospitalization. Why would a normal person like him stay in a mental hospital? Staying with a bunch of patients who actually need treatment every day, not being able to go out, not being able to use his phone, not being able to see Su Wan, and having to take medicine and do therapy at fixed times." He didn't even dare to imagine that scene. "Of course I refused. You were so against hospitalization before, how could your godmother not know?" Su Wan nodded as if it were a matter of course, with an expression that said, "I'm your godmother, don't I understand you?" Fang Tian breathed a sigh of relief and was just about to praise her by saying, "Godmother knows me best," when he noticed a subtle change in Su Wan's expression. The corners of her mouth were still upturned, but her eyes began to wander, her gaze shifting from his face to the sycamore tree trunk by the road, and then from the trunk to the sky. Her hands were unconsciously twisting the handle of the medical record bag. "But, Dr. Zhang was very insistent," Su Wan said. "Another but?" Fang Tian's ominous premonition grew stronger. "I told her all about your situation. I said you are recovering very well at home, your emotions are stable, you eat on time every day, you are willing to go out, and you are willing to communicate with people. I said that you are particularly repulsed by the hospital environment and have been very resistant every time you were hospitalized before. Staying at my place is actually more relaxing for you. And then?" Fang Tian pressed. "Then Dr. Zhang said." "Said what?" Su Wan took a deep breath and said in a comforting tone, "First, Tian Tian, don't get anxious. She just said that sometimes you can't just listen to the patient's side of the story. Because the patient might not be clear about what state they are actually in. Doctors are the professionals." Fang Tian. He felt like he was walking down the street and suddenly got hit on the back of the head by a coconut falling from a tree. Seeing his expression was off, Su Wan quickly continued, "What she said makes sense, and your godmother couldn't win the argument against her. So in the end, we both took a step back. You won't be hospitalized. But she, as your private doctor, will come to our house to observe for a week. She said her observation won't disrupt your life rhythm, you can eat, sleep, and paint as you normally do. And she won't charge money." When she reached the words "won't charge money" at the end, Su Wan's tone was clearly filled with the emotion of Dr. Zhang is really a good person, and she even glanced down at Fang Tian, as if observing to see if her big baby would overthink it. Fang Tian's internal monologue was already firing off like a barrage of bullet comments. Won't charge money? Not charging money is the most expensive thing. Godmother. It looks like a free house call, but in reality, Zhongting has already treated him as a walking medical case study. Why did the stretch marks disappear? How did his weight recover so quickly? Why were the scale scores all normal? These questions had probably already spun through her mind several times. Observing him at home for a week, his every life habit and routine would be recorded by her, from his behavior to his expressions to every word he said, everything would be treated as an analysis sample. This wasn't a doctor's house call. This was a researcher in a white coat coming to conduct field research on a lab rat. But he couldn't blame Su Wan. In Su Wan's worldview, doctors act for the patient's good, and Zhongting had the halo of a degree from studying abroad in Germany, plus a mouth that could package professional knowledge so tightly not a drop could leak out. How could a godmother like Su Wan possibly win an argument against her? In her eyes, this was just a sign of a doctor caring for a patient. Dr. Zhang is so busy, how could she possibly stay at our house 24/7? Fang Tian asked with a glimmer of hope, maybe it's just a formality, just coming by for a quick visit each day and leaving. This question appeared to be directed at Su Wan, but in reality, he was comforting himself. Su Wan's tone held a hint of emotion. I asked that question too. She really can. She said the hospital director is her aunt, so taking a week off is no difficulty at all. Doctors like Dr. Zhang who are professional, responsible, and don't charge money are truly rare. Speaking to the end, Su Wan exclaimed sincerely. She truly felt in her heart that Zhongting was a good person. Not charging money, willing to make house calls. Solid professional knowledge. Where can you find doctors like this these days? They were lucky to have met such an attending physician. Fang Tian was completely speechless. In just over 10 minutes, the amount of information the two women discussed was comparable to a small press conference. The current situation meant that Zhongting not only had professional skills but also unlimited freedom of time. She could stare at him from morning till night, observe him eating, drinking, pooping, and sleeping, and record every detail in that notebook of hers. Fang Tian took a deep breath and gave himself a mental massage. Whether he stuck his head out or pulled it back, he'd get the blade anyway. Instead of being locked up in a hospital ward and gawked at by a group of nurses, it was better to be observed at home. Although there was a high probability of being able to farm attribute points with nurses at the hospital, wasn't doing yoga with his godmother at home just as good? He asked with a last shred of hope, did Dr. Zhang say when she's coming? 3 days from now. She said she'd give us some time to prepare. She said she isn't picky about where she stays, sleeping on the sofa is fine. As Su Wan spoke, the expression on her face had changed from a bit worried that Fang Tian might overthink to I must properly host Dr. Zhang. That won't do, letting Dr. Zhang sleep on the sofa is too impolite. Fang Tian quickly chimed in, fortunately, our house is a 3-bedroom apartment, the 3rd bedroom has been empty. Halfway through his sentence, he shut his mouth. Why was he helping Zhongting arrange a room? Why would His Majesty surrender for no reason? Exactly. That's what I thought too. Although the last bedroom isn't as big as the master bedroom, it's not small either, cleaning it up to accommodate her is no problem at all. So, Tian Tian, you agree, right? That's great. Su Wan smiled until her eyes curved and patted his arm, her tone filled with satisfaction that as expected, my Tian Tian is reasonable. Fang Tian's hanging heart completely died. Returning home, the first thing Fang Tian did was take a shower, change clothes, and then use up all his accumulated attribute points. 8 attribute points, all dumped into X ability at once. Balanced development, comprehensive point distribution? That doesn't exist. Single-minded development is the right path. The number on the attribute panel jumped from 56 to 64. The note also refreshed accordingly. X ability, 64, Congratulations, through your unremitting efforts, your X ability has surpassed half of the men on this planet. Little Fang Tian's length 13.44 centimeters, combined with your rich theoretical knowledge, is enough to allow you to conquer many women. Perhaps you are curious why that 0.1 centimeters is missing, because the true artifact that can conquer women, besides being unrivaled in length, must also be proud in girth. The extra 0.1 centimeters has been added by the system to the girth on its own initiative. Fang Tian. He closed the attribute panel, sat on the bed, and began to calculate. Zhongting is coming over in 3 days, in these 3 days, he must crazily farm attribute points, the more the better. After Zhongting arrives, he will have to hold back when farming attribute points. He won't be able to choose any of the system's heaven-defying options, otherwise, Zhongting might conclude at any moment that he needs continued observation. However, since Zhongting is coming to observe him, he might as well observe her back. This woman's curiosity is too strong, and women with strong curiosity are often easily led by their own curiosity. She thinks she's here to study a lab rat, but who knows, by the end of her research, she might become the lab rat herself. Fang Tian lay down on the bed, looking at the ceiling. Things had already reached this point. Since he couldn't resist, he might as well enjoy the process. Prepare to welcome Zhongting.